Captain Vexistar's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the massive creatures surrounding them. Morrison, you will step away from those aliens immediately, or Security Chief Grixnell will use force to extract you. That would be a mistake, Jake said quietly while maintaining his connection with Storm. Through their mental link, he could feel the entire Voidkin pack evaluating every word and action of his crewmates. Grixnell raised his plasma rifle and aimed it at Storm. These beasts may be large, but Korvaxi weapons will burn through any hide. Before Jake could warn him not to fire, Grixnell pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt shot toward Storm's chest but passed harmlessly through the Voidkin's body, as if he was made of empty space. Storm had shifted partially into another dimension, making himself untouchable by normal matter. Impossible, one of the Zephyrians said in its musical voice. No creature can exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. The failed attack triggered a response that terrified the rescue team. More Voidkin began materializing around the clearing, emerging from folds in space itself. Beings made of living crystal rose from the planet's surface where they had been dormant. Energy entities descended from the upper atmosphere, their forms crackling with barely contained power. Within seconds, the Federation team found themselves surrounded by creatures that existed beyond their understanding of physics. Some appeared solid, while others flickered between states of matter. A few seemed to be made of pure light, while others looked like they were carved from the darkness between stars. "Stand down," Captain Vextar hissed to his security team. "Do not fire unless I give direct orders." Jake felt Storm's amusement through their mental connection. The Voidkin leader was impressed by the captain's wisdom, but also saddened by how quickly the Federation crew had resorted to violence when faced with the unknown. "They're not hostile," Jake explained. "They're trying to determine if humanity is ready for contact with cosmic-level intelligence." Through Storm's consciousness, Jake began to understand the true nature of galactic civilization. The dominant species in the Federation had built their society on principles of individual superiority and species isolation. Each race had evolved to excel in one specific area, then use that advantage to dominate others. The Korvaxi were supreme warriors who solved problems through force. The Zephyrians had developed advanced computational abilities that made them excellent engineers and scientists. The Silithani were master traders who controlled commerce through manipulation and cunning. But none of these species had learned to truly cooperate across biological barriers. They formed alliances based on mutual benefit, but they did not understand the concept of genuine partnership with beings fundamentally different from themselves. Storm shared memories of ancient conflicts between galactic powers that had lasted for thousands of years, wars that could have been prevented if the combatants had possessed the ability to find common ground instead of focusing on their differences. The galaxy has been trapped in the same patterns for millions of years, Jake said as understanding flooded through him. Every species reaches a certain level of development, then stagnates because they can't learn to work with others who think differently. Captain Vextar's forked tongue flicked out nervously. "What are you talking about, Morrison? The Federation represents the pinnacle of interspecies cooperation." "No," Jake replied. "The Federation is just a collection of separate species who trade with each other. Real cooperation means forming bonds that make everyone stronger." Through Storm's memories, Jake saw examples of what true cooperation could accomplish. Ancient Voidkin hunting parties that had tracked cosmic threats across multiple galaxies working in perfect harmony despite being composed of beings from dozens of different species and dimensional states. The planet, Kepler itself was an example of ultimate cooperation. The living crystal networks, the energy entities, and the Voidkin all worked together to maintain a cosmic monitoring station that protected younger species from threats they could not imagine. "Earth is different," Jake continued as the revelation became clear. "Our planet produced something the galaxy has never seen before." Storm confirmed this by sharing the Voidkin's observations of Earth's development. While other worlds created single dominant species that either destroyed their competition or achieved balance through separation, Earth had done something unprecedented. Jake's home planet, thousands of different species had learned to share the same environment in ways that actually made the entire ecosystem stronger. Predators and prey evolved together in complex relationships that created stability rather than destruction. Even microscopic bacteria had learned to cooperate in ways that enabled the development of more complex life forms. That's why the Voidkin were curious about me, Jake explained to his crewmates. Earth taught humans to form connections across biological barriers. We instinctively look for ways to cooperate with other species instead of dominating them. The planet around them began to respond to Jake's growing understanding. The electromagnetic pulses that had puzzled the Federation scientists synchronized with his heartbeat. The floating islands shifted position to form patterns that mirrored neural networks. The dancing lights in the atmosphere pulsed in rhythm with his thoughts. Luna Blake was recording everything with her scanner, and her expression showed amazement mixed with fear. Jake, the entire planet is responding to your presence. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Through his connection with Storm, Jake realized that Kepler 442c was more than just a world inhabited by unusual creatures. The planet itself was a conscious entity that served as a nexus point in the galactic web of life. It was a place where the universe's most evolved beings gathered to test whether younger species were ready for the next stage of cosmic development. This is all a test, Jake said as the pieces fell into place. The Voidkin have been waiting for a species that could bridge the gaps between different forms of consciousness. Storm shared the collective memory of the Voidkin pack stretching back millions of years. They had watched countless civilizations rise and fall, always hoping that one of them would develop the ability to form genuine connections across species barriers. Most galactic civilizations followed the same pattern. They achieved technological advancement and spread across multiple star systems, but eventually they destroyed themselves through conflicts that could have been avoided with better cooperation. The Federation was further along than most previous civilizations, but it still suffered from the same fundamental limitation. Each member species remained focused on their own superiority instead of learning to truly work together. Humans are different because Earth is different, Jake explained as his connection with Storm deepened. Our planet taught us that diversity creates strength instead of weakness. Captain Vextar was beginning to understand the implications of what Jake was saying. You're suggesting that humanity's value to the galaxy is not our technology or our military strength. Our value is our ability to form bonds with beings completely different from ourselves, Jake confirmed. That's what the Voidkin have been searching for across the galaxy for millions of years. The revelation was overwhelming, but Storm's presence in Jake's mind helped him process concepts that would have driven most beings insane. The ancient Voidkin had developed mental techniques that allowed them to share cosmic-level knowledge without destroying younger minds. As Jake's understanding grew, the planet's response became more intense. Crystal formations throughout the forest began resonating in harmony, creating music that could be felt in their bones. The energy entities in the atmosphere started dancing in patterns that told the story of cosmic evolution. The test is not just about me, Jake realized. It's about whether humanity as a species is ready to take on a larger role in cosmic affairs. Through Storm's consciousness, Jake could see the vast web of threats that existed beyond the Federation's knowledge, entities of pure hunger that consumed entire star systems, beings made of crystallized time that could unravel causality itself, ancient machines left behind by extinct civilizations that still carried out destructive programming. The Voidkin had been fighting these cosmic threats alone for millions of years, but they were growing tired. They needed partners who could help them protect the galaxy's younger species from dangers beyond imagination. Earth's children might be the bridge we have been seeking. Storm communicated through their mental link. But first they must prove they can accept knowledge that will change them forever. Jake looked at his crewmates and saw fear, confusion, and wonder in their faces. This moment would determine not just his own fate, but possibly humanity's entire future relationship with cosmic-level intelligence. Captain, Jake said, I need you to trust me and let me show you what real cooperation can accomplish. But once you see what I'm going to show you, nothing will ever be the same. Jake felt Storm's consciousness expand within his mind, and suddenly he was connected not just to one Voidkin, but to the entire pack spread across Kepler 442c. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like trying to hear dozens of conversations at once, but gradually the individual voices merged into a collective awareness that was greater than the sum of its parts. What's happening to him? Luna Blake whispered as she watched Jake's eyes begin to reflect the same starlight as Storm's. Captain Vextar raised his hand to keep his security team from interfering. Something about the way the massive creatures around them had gone completely still warned him that any sudden movement might trigger a response they could not handle. Through the expanding mental network, Jake began to understand the true purpose of this moment. The Voidkin were not just testing his individual ability to form connections across species barriers. They were evaluating humanity's potential to serve as bridges between forms of consciousness that had never been able to communicate before. As his awareness grew, Jake found himself connecting to the crystal beings that had risen from the planet's surface. Their thoughts moved slowly like geological processes, but contained memories that stretched back to the formation of the galaxy itself. Through them, he learned about the deep patterns that governed cosmic evolution and the delicate balance that kept reality stable. The crystal entities remember when this galaxy was young, Jake said aloud for the benefit of his crewmates. They've been watching over cosmic development for billions of years, but they can only communicate through vibrations in planetary crust. The energy beings that crackled in the atmosphere above them were next to join the expanding network. Their consciousness moved at the speed of light, jumping between quantum states faster than most minds could follow. Through them, Jake experienced the universe as patterns of information flowing through electromagnetic fields. The energy entities see reality as data streams, Jake explained while his awareness continued to expand. They understand the quantum mechanics that hold matter together, but they can't relate to beings trapped in single-dimensional states. Each new connection added layers of understanding that Jake's human mind should not have been able to process. But Storm's presence provided a stabilizing influence that allowed him to integrate knowledge from beings that existed across multiple dimensions and states of matter. The planet itself was the final consciousness to join the network, and when that connection formed, Jake's awareness exploded beyond anything he had imagined possible. Kepler 442c was not just alive, but served as a cosmic monitoring station that observed threats to galactic stability across thousands of light years. Through the planetary consciousness, Jake saw the hidden dangers that lurked in the darkness between stars, entities that fed on stellar energy and could drain entire systems of life, beings made of crystallized space-time that warped reality around them, ancient weapons that continued operating long after their creators had vanished. The galaxy is not as safe as the Federation believes, Jake said, as his expanded awareness took in threats that existed beyond normal perception. There are things out there that could destroy entire civilizations, and most species never even know they exist. The collective consciousness showed Jake why the Voidkin had taken on the responsibility of hunting these cosmic threats. Millions of years ago, the galaxy had been much more dangerous, with regular invasions from entities that existed in the dark spaces between dimensions. Younger species had lived in constant terror until the Voidkin emerged to serve as guardians. But the long hunt had isolated the Voidkin from other forms of life. Their cosmic perspective made it almost impossible for them to relate to beings concerned with planetary rather than galactic affairs. They had become so focused on hunting monsters that they had forgotten how to form the simple connections that made life meaningful. That's why our contact was so important to Storm, Jake realized. The Voidkin have been alone for so long they'd almost forgotten what it felt like to share their experiences with someone else. Through the network, Jake could feel Storm's wonder at being able to communicate the beauty and terror of cosmic hunting to a mind that could understand both the scientific concepts and the emotional meaning behind them. For the first time in centuries, Storm was not alone with memories that no one else could comprehend. But this is just the beginning, Jake said as he felt the collective consciousness reaching a decision that would change everything. They want to know if humanity can help bridge the gaps between all the different forms of intelligence in the galaxy. Captain Vexistar's yellow eyes widened as he began to understand the implications. You're talking about creating connections between species that have never been able to communicate before. Exactly, Jake confirmed. Earth taught humans to cooperate across biological barriers that other species consider impossible to cross. The Voidkin think we might be able to do the same thing on a cosmic scale. The test was about to begin, and Jake felt his consciousness stretching to accommodate even more alien perspectives. One by one, representatives of species from across the galaxy began joining the network. Some existed as pure energy, while others were based on silicon or exotic matter. A few seemed to be made of crystallized time itself. Each new connection brought knowledge that transformed Jake's understanding of what life could become. He experienced existence as a gas giant consciousness that thought in terms of atmospheric pressure, changes over centuries. He felt the perspective of a hive mind composed of trillions of microscopic entities that functioned as a single being. "I can hear them all," Jake whispered in amazement. "Every different form of consciousness in the galaxy, and they're all trying to share their experiences with me." Luna Blake was recording everything, but her scanner readings made no sense. "Jake, your brain activity is showing patterns that shouldn't be possible. You're processing information at rates that would overload any known neural system." But Jake was not overloading because Storm and the other Voidkin were sharing the mental load. Their ancient minds had developed techniques for handling cosmic-level consciousness that they were now teaching to their human partner. Together, they could process and integrate knowledge from beings that spanned the entire spectrum of galactic intelligence. The network reached critical mass when representatives from every major form of consciousness in the galaxy were connected through Jake's expanding awareness. For the first time in cosmic history, beings that had never been able to communicate were sharing their thoughts and experiences through a bridge created by human consciousness. "It's working," Jake said as he felt understanding flowing between entities that had been isolated for millions of years. "They're actually talking to each other through me." The energy beings were sharing their knowledge of quantum mechanics, with crystalline entities that processed information through mineral structures. Gas giant consciousnesses were exchanging atmospheric data with hive minds that thought in terms of collective behavior patterns. Each connection created new possibilities for cooperation that had never existed before. But the greatest revelation came when Jake realized that Earth itself was part of this cosmic network. His home planet's biosphere was connected to the galactic web of consciousness in ways that no human had ever suspected. Earth's incredible biodiversity was not just a local phenomenon, but part of a cosmic experiment in cooperative evolution. "Earth has been preparing humanity for this role for millions of years," Jake said as the full scope of the plan became clear. "Our planet's ecosystem taught us to form bonds across species barriers because the galaxy needed beings who could serve as bridges between different forms of consciousness." The test concluded with Jake successfully mediating communication between beings that had never shared thoughts before. Through his expanding awareness, crystalline entities began to understand the rapid information processing of energy beings. Gas giant consciousnesses learned to appreciate the collective decision-making of hive minds. Most importantly, the ancient Voidkin were no longer alone with their cosmic responsibilities. They now had partners who could help them protect the galaxy's younger species while also learning from the incredible diversity of consciousness that existed throughout the universe. As the network began to contract back to its normal size, Jake felt Storm's gratitude flowing through their connection. The lonely cosmic hunter had found something he had never expected to discover again. He had found genuine friendship with a being who could understand both the beauty and the burden of protecting life on a galactic scale. "What happens now?" Captain Vextar asked as he watched Jake's eyes return to their normal human appearance. "Now we go home," Jake replied. "But everything has changed. Humanity has been invited to join something much larger than the Galactic Federation." Storm and several other Voidkin stepped forward, indicating their decision to accompany Jake back to Federation space. For the first time in their ancient history, the cosmic hunters were willing to work openly with younger species, instead of protecting them from a distance. "The galaxy is about to become a much more connected place," Jake said as he looked at his crewmates with new understanding. "And humans are going to serve as the bridges that make it possible." The shuttle dropped through Kepler 442c's atmosphere like a stone falling through thick honey. Jake gripped his seat as the craft shook and rattled around him. Captain Vextar had changed his mind at the last moment and decided Jake should come along after all, but only because they needed someone to carry equipment and take notes. "Atmospheric readings are stable," Luna Blake called from the pilot's seat. "Gravity is surprisingly close to Earth normal despite the planet's larger size." Grixenal checked his weapons for the third time. "Good, my warriors fight best in familiar conditions. These alien beasts will learn quickly why the Korvaxi are feared across the galaxy." Jake looked out the shuttle window as they descended toward the surface. The planet was even more beautiful up close, with forests that seemed to be made of living crystal, and floating islands connected by streams of pure light. But something felt wrong about the way his equipment was behaving. "My scanner readings are fluctuating," Jake said quietly. "The electromagnetic interference is stronger than our long-range sensors detected." "Perhaps your human technology is simply inferior," said one of the Zephyrians in its musical voice. "Our crystal-based systems are far more advanced." But Jake noticed that the Zephyrians' own crystal appendages were flickering in strange patterns. The electromagnetic field around this planet was affecting everyone's equipment in ways they did not understand. The shuttle touched down in a clearing surrounded by towering crystal trees that rang like bells when the wind moved through them. As the team gathered their gear, Jake felt the hair on his arms stand up, like electricity was building in the air around them. "Stay close and follow standard exploration protocol," Captain Vextar ordered. "We will establish a perimeter and then move deeper into the forest to locate the source of those biosignatures." The away team consisted of 8 members, including Jake. Besides Luna and himself, there were 4 Korvaxi warriors led by Grixnal plus 2 Zephyrian technical specialists. Jake carried the sample containers and backup equipment while trying to stay out of everyone's way. As they moved into the crystal forest, Jake noticed that the trees were not really trees at all, but some kind of living mineral formation that pulsed with inner light. The ground beneath their feet felt warm and seemed to vibrate with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. "These readings are impossible," Luna whispered to Jake. "The crystal formations are showing signs of biological activity, but they're made of pure silicon and metal compounds." Jake nodded and pointed to strange tracks in the soft ground. "Look at these footprints. They're huge, but they seem to fade in and out like something was only partially solid when it walked here." Before anyone could respond to Jake's observation, the forest around them went completely silent. Even the wind stopped moving through the crystal trees. The sudden quiet made everyone freeze in place and look around nervously. "Defensive positions," Grixnal barked to his warriors. That was when they saw the first creature. It emerged from behind a cluster of crystal formations that should not have been large enough to hide something so massive. The beast was the size of a shuttlecraft with fur that seemed to shift and change color, like it was made of liquid starlight. Its eyes were deep black with points of light that looked like distant stars. "By the void," Captain Vextar hissed. "How did something that large hide behind those small crystals?" More creatures appeared around them, moving through the crystal forest with impossible silence. Jake counted at least 6 of the massive wolf-like beings, and they all had the same star-filled eyes and shifting fur that seemed to bend light around their bodies. "They're surrounding us," Luna said in a steady voice, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. The largest of the creatures stepped forward, and Jake felt something brush against his mind. It was not painful or invasive, but curious, like someone gently knocking on a door. The sensation made him dizzy, and he had to lean against a crystal tree to keep from falling. "What are you doing, human?" Grixnal demanded. "Stand ready to fight." But Jake could not move. The mental contact was growing stronger, and he started to see flashes of images that were not his own memories. He saw vast spaces between stars where these creatures hunted things that lived in the darkness. He felt the bonds between pack members that were stronger than family ties among most species. The lead creature approached Jake directly while the other team members raised their weapons. Its massive head came down until it was only inches from Jake's face, and he could see galaxies swirling in its dark eyes. When the creature sniffed him, Jake smelled something like ozone and starlight. Without thinking, he slowly extended his hand toward the beast's muzzle. Every other member of the away team was shouting for him to get back, but Jake felt like he was moving in a dream. The moment his fingers touched the creature's fur, everything changed. Jake's mind was flooded with alien thoughts and emotions so intense he fell to his knees. He saw the universe through the creature's eyes and understood that these beings traveled between stars, like other animals moved between hunting grounds. They were ancient beyond measure and had been watching the development of younger species for millions of years. The creature, which Jake somehow knew was called Storm, shared its confusion about the small beings that had recently appeared in this sector of space. It had observed ships from the Galactic Federation before, but always from a distance. This was the first time any of the young species had come to one of the pack's resting worlds. Through Storm's memories, Jake saw Earth from space and understood why his home planet looked different to these cosmic hunters. Earth glowed with an energy pattern that the creatures recognized but had never seen in such intensity. It was the light of countless different species learning to live, Together, instead of destroying each other, the connection lasted only a few seconds, in real time, but it felt like hours to Jake. When Storm pulled back and the mental link faded, Jake found himself sitting on the ground with his teammates staring at him in shock and fear. "What did that thing do to you?" Captain Vextar demanded. "Are you injured or contaminated?" Jake tried to stand up, but his legs felt weak. "It was just curious about us. These creatures are not dangerous unless we threaten them." "Not dangerous?" Grixnell shouted. "Look at the size of those teeth. Those claws could cut through our shuttle hull." But even as the security chief spoke, the pack of creatures was already withdrawing. Storm looked back at Jake one more time, and Jake felt another brief touch against his mind. This time the emotion was clear even without words. Storm was as surprised by their connection as Jake was. "They're leaving," Luna observed. "Whatever just happened, they seemed satisfied with the contact." The massive wolf-like beings faded back into the crystal forest, moving through spaces between trees that should have been too small for their bulk. Within moments, they had vanished completely, leaving only the lingering scent of starlight and the memory of impossible eyes. "We need to return to the ship immediately," Captain Vextar declared. "That creature may have infected the human with some kind of psychic parasite." "I'm fine," Jake protested. "It was just making contact. They're intelligent and curious, not hostile." But nobody listened to his explanation. The away team packed their equipment quickly and headed back toward the shuttle, while Jake struggled to process what he had experienced. The brief connection with Storm had shown him wonders beyond imagination, but it had also left him with questions that he could not answer. As the shuttle lifted off from the planet's surface, Jake pressed his face to the window and looked down at the crystal forest. Somewhere down there, Storm and his pack were watching them leave, and Jake felt an almost physical pain at breaking that connection. "The readings we collected are incredible," Luna said to Captain Vextar. "These life forms seem to exist partially outside normal spacetime. That would explain how they appeared and disappeared so quickly." "Irrelevant," the captain replied. "We will report this planet as extremely dangerous and recommend that it be quarantined from all Federation shipping." Jake wanted to argue that the creatures were not dangerous, but he could still feel the echo of Storm's thoughts in his mind. These beings were far more complex than his crewmates could imagine, and Jake somehow knew that his brief contact with them was only the beginning of something much larger. As Horizon's edge moved away from Kepler 442, Jake stared out at the planet's swirling lights and made a decision that would change his life forever. Somehow he was going to find a way to return to that world and learn more about the creatures that hunted between the stars. The connection he had felt with Storm was unlike anything in his experience, but it had also felt familiar, like coming home after a long journey. Jake did not understand what that meant yet, but he intended to find out, even if it meant defying direct orders and risking his career with the Federation. Jake waited until the night shift took over before he made his move. The corridors of Horizon's Edge were dimly lit, and most of the crew was either sleeping or focused on their duties. He had spent 3 days planning this moment, and he knew exactly where every security camera was positioned. The emergency shuttle in Bay 2 was designed for solo operations, and Jake had checked its systems twice to make sure everything was working properly. Captain Vextar had forbidden anyone from returning to Kepler 442c, but Jake could not stop thinking about Storm and the brief connection they had shared. "Computer authorize emergency shuttle launch for xenobiology research mission," Jake said as he settled into the pilot's seat. "Authorization denied," the computer replied. "Current orders prohibit surface contact with Kepler 442c. Jake had expected this response and pulled out a data chip he had prepared earlier. "Override with personal research authorization code Morrison Alpha 7. It was a fake code, but Jake had programmed it into the shuttle's system during his last maintenance shift. The computer processed the information for several seconds before responding. "Authorization accepted. Emergency shuttle cleared for launch." The shuttle bay doors opened, and Jake guided the small craft out into space. Behind him, Horizon's Edge continued its patrol route, while ahead the planet Kepler 442c hung in space like a jewel, covered in dancing lights. As Jake entered the planet's atmosphere, he felt the same electromagnetic interference that had affected their equipment during the first mission. But this time he was ready for it and had modified his systems to work with the planet's unusual energy fields instead of fighting against them. The shuttle touched down in the same crystal forest clearing where they had first encountered Storm's pack. Jake powered down the engines and sat quietly for several minutes, listening to the strange music the crystal trees made when wind moved through them. He did not have to wait long. Storm emerged from the forest exactly as he had before stepping out from behind crystal formations that seemed too small to hide his massive form. But this time he was alone, and he approached Jake's shuttle without hesitation. Jake opened the hatch and stepped out onto the warm ground. Storm's star-filled eyes studied him carefully, and Jake felt the familiar touch against his mind. This time the mental contact was gentler and more controlled, like Storm had learned something about human psychology from their first encounter. "I came back," Jake said aloud, even though he knew Storm could understand his thoughts directly. The massive creature moved closer, and Jake reached out to touch the shifting fur on Storm's neck. The moment contact was made, Jake's consciousness expanded beyond his physical body, and he found himself sharing Storm's cosmic perspective. Through Storm's memories, Jake learned that these creatures were called the Voidkin, and they were far older than any species in the Galactic Federation. They hunted across the dark spaces between stars, pursuing entities that threatened the stability of space-time itself. Most younger species never saw them because the Voidkin existed partially outside normal reality. Storm showed Jake visions of cosmic hunts that spanned centuries. The pack worked together to track down beings of pure energy that fed on stellar matter, or creatures made of condensed dark matter that could collapse entire star systems. It was dangerous work that required perfect coordination across vast distances, but the Voidkin were not just hunters. They were guardians of cosmic balance who had taken on the responsibility of protecting younger species from threats they could not understand or defend against. They had been watching the development of galactic civilization for millions of years, waiting for signs that the younger races might be ready for contact. Through Storm's eyes, Jake saw Earth from a perspective that no human had ever experienced. His home planet glowed with interconnected webs of life that created patterns the Voidkin recognized as something unique in the galaxy. Earth had produced creatures that learned to cooperate across species barriers in ways that even the ancient Voidkin found remarkable. "That's why you were curious about me," Jake said, as understanding dawned. "You recognize something familiar." Storm confirmed this with a flood of images showing Earth's incredible biodiversity. From the smallest bacteria that worked together in colonies to the complex relationships between predators and prey, everything on Earth was connected in a vast web of cooperation and competition that created stability instead of destruction. Most planets in the galaxy produced single dominant species that either destroyed their competition or achieved balance through separation. But Earth had created something unprecedented, where thousands of different species shared the same environment and actually made each other stronger through their interactions. Storm's pack had been debating among themselves about whether humans might possess the same ability to form connections across impossible barriers. Jake's willingness to make mental contact with an alien predator had answered that question in a way that surprised even the ancient Voidkin. As the mental connection deepened, Jake began to understand the planet Kepler 442c itself. It was not just a world that the Voidkin used as a resting place. The entire planet was a living entity that existed as a bridge between normal space and the dark dimensions, where cosmic threats originated. The crystal trees were neural networks that allowed the planet to think and communicate across galactic distances. The floating islands were organs that processed energy from other dimensions. The dancing lights in the atmosphere were thoughts made visible as the planetary consciousness monitored threats to cosmic stability. Jake felt overwhelmed by the scale of what he was learning, but Storm's presence in his mind helped him process information that would have driven most beings insane. The Voidkin had developed mental techniques over millions of years that allowed them to share knowledge without damaging younger minds. "Why are you showing me all this?" Jake asked. Storm's response came as a complex mixture of emotions and concepts that took Jake several minutes to understand. The Voidkin had been alone for so long that they had almost forgotten what it felt like to make genuine contact with another conscious being. Their cosmic hunts required them to think in ways that were completely alien to most forms of life. But Jake's mind was different. His human ability to form emotional bonds, combined with his scientific training, created a bridge that allowed Storm to share experiences that had been locked away for centuries. For the first time in ages, Storm could show someone else the beauty and terror of hunting through cosmic darkness. The connection was interrupted by the sound of shuttle engines approaching from orbit. Jake looked up to see several Federation craft descending toward their location. Through his link with Storm, he felt the Voidkin's immediate concern, followed by a decision that surprised them both. Instead of withdrawing into the forest, Storm called to his pack members scattered across the planet. Within moments, other Voidkin began emerging from fold in space itself, materializing around the clearing in numbers that made Jake's knees weak. They're coming to help, Jake realized as more and more of the massive creatures appeared. Storm confirmed this while sharing his pack's collective decision. The other Voidkin had been monitoring Jake's mental contact with Storm, and they had reached a unanimous conclusion. Jake represented something they had been searching for across the galaxy for millions of years. The Federation shuttles landed, and Jake could see his crewmates through the transparent canopies. Captain Vextar looked furious while Grixnall and his warriors were checking their weapons. Luna Blake was operating a scanner, and her expression showed both concern and scientific fascination. They think you've been compromised by alien influence. Storm warned Jake through their mental link. Jake nodded and stepped away from Storm but maintained their connection. Then I guess it's time to show them what real cooperation looks like. The shuttle hatches opened and Captain Vextar slithered out, followed by the rest of the rescue team. They found themselves surrounded by dozens of Voidkin whose star-filled eyes reflected the dancing lights of the planet's atmosphere. "Step away from those creatures, Morrison," the captain ordered. "You are clearly under some form of psychic control." "I'm not controlled," Jake replied calmly. "I'm connected." "There's a difference." Through his link with Storm, Jake could feel the collective consciousness of the entire Voidkin pack. They were all listening to this conversation and evaluating humanity's potential, based on how Jake's crewmates responded to this first real contact with cosmic intelligence. Jake realized that this moment would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the future relationship between humanity and beings that existed far beyond the Galactic Federation's understanding. The weight of that responsibility was terrifying, but Storm's presence in his mind gave him the strength to face what came next. "Captain," Jake said, "I need you to listen very carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will change everything we thought we knew about life in this galaxy." Jake Morrison stood alone in the corner of the mess hall watching the other crew members eat their morning meal. The tall, blue-skinned Korvaxi warriors laughed loudly at their table, while the crystal-like Zephyrians made soft musical sounds as they absorbed energy from glowing cubes. Jake held his simple human food tray and wondered why he even bothered coming to eat with the others anymore. The research ship called Horizon's Edge had been his home for 6 months now, and every day felt the same. The alien crew members treated him like he was made of glass or like he might break if they looked at him too hard. Some days they acted like he was not even there at all. Captain Vextar slithered into the mess hall on his long, snake-like body. His scales were dark green and his yellow eyes looked around the room until they found Jake. The captain's mouth turned down in what Jake had learned was the Slithani version of a frown. "Small human," Captain Vexistar said in his hissing voice. "Why do you take up space here when you could eat in your quarters like the other weak species do?" The Korvaxi warriors started laughing again. Their leader Grixnall stood up to his full 8 feet of height and looked down at Jake. "Captain is right. This tiny flesh thing should not eat where real warriors gather." Jake felt his face get hot, but he said nothing. He had learned that talking back only made things worse. The Zephyrians at their table made sounds that Jake knew meant they were laughing too, even though their crystal faces could not show expressions. "Look how red his face gets," said one of the Korvaxi. "Do all humans change colors when they are embarrassed, or is this one broken?" Jake picked up his tray and started walking toward the exit. He did not want to listen to more jokes about how weak humans were or how Earth must be the softest planet in the galaxy to produce such fragile creatures. "Wait!" Captain Vexitar called out. "Before you run away to hide, we have received new orders from Federation Command." The mess hall became quiet. Jake stopped walking and turned around even though he wanted to keep going to his quarters. Captain Vexitar touched a control panel on the wall, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a planet with swirling clouds and strange lights dancing across its surface. "This is Kepler 442c," the captain said. "Long-range scans have detected massive life forms and unusual energy readings. The Federation wants us to investigate and determine if the planet poses any threat to shipping lanes. Jake looked at the planet display and felt something strange. The way the lights moved across the surface seemed almost like they were forming patterns. The cloud system swirled in ways that reminded him of something, but he could not figure out. What? The biosignatures are enormous, said Chief Science Officer Luna Blake. She was one of the few crew members who ever spoke to Jake in a normal way. Some of these readings suggest creatures larger than our ship. Grixenal laughed and flexed his forearms. Let them be large. Korvaxi warriors have fought beasts the size of mountains. These aliens will learn to fear us quickly enough. Jake studied the data more carefully. The biosignatures were not just large, but they moved in coordinated groups. The energy readings pulsed in steady rhythms like a heartbeat that covered the entire planet. Something about this place felt different from other worlds they had visited. Captain, Jake said quietly, the movement patterns suggest pack intelligence, and the energy pulses seem to be some kind of planet-wide communication system. The entire mess hall turned to look at Jake. Captain Vextar's yellow eyes narrowed and his forked tongue flicked out to taste the air. Did someone ask for the opinion of the weakest crew member? The captain said. I do not remember requesting input from something that weighs less than my smallest scale. The Korvaxi warriors started laughing again. One of them made a comment about how humans probably saw danger everywhere because they were naturally cowardly. Perhaps the little human should stay on the ship when we visit this planet, Grixenal said. We would not want him to faint when he sees a real predator. Jake felt his hands shake, but he tried one more time. The electromagnetic readings are not random. They pulse every 47 seconds in groups of 3. That suggests organized communication across vast distances. Enough, Captain Vextar hissed. Security Chief Grixenal will lead the away team to this planet, and we will show these creatures why the Galactic Federation is not to be challenged. You will stay on the ship where you belong. Jake wanted to argue, but he knew it would only make the captain more angry. He nodded and headed for the exit while the other crew members continued discussing their plans for exploring. Kepler 442, the corridor outside the mess hall. Jake walked slowly toward the observation deck. It was the one place on the ship where he could be alone and think without interruption. The large windows showed the stars streaming past as the ship traveled through hyperspace toward their destination. Jake sat in his favorite spot near the biggest window and pulled out his data pad. He reviewed the planetary scans again, and the strange feeling in his stomach grew stronger. The energy patterns were too regular to be natural, and the biosignatures moved like they were following complex strategies. Computer, Jake said to the ship's artificial intelligence, cross-reference the energy pulse patterns from Kepler 442c with known forms of planetary communication systems. Working, the computer replied. No matches found in Federation databases. The patterns do not correspond to any known technology or natural phenomena. Jake frowned and tried a different approach. Computer, compare the biosignature movement patterns with pack hunting behaviors from Deathworld species. Working. Patterns show 73% similarity to coordinated pack hunting strategies observed on high-danger planets including Earth. Jake felt his heart beat faster. Earth was classified as a death world because of its dangerous wildlife and harsh conditions. Most alien species considered it a miracle that humans had survived long enough to develop space travel. But Jake knew that Earth's creatures had learned to work together in ways that most galaxy species thought impossible. Computer display. Earth pack hunting data alongside Kepler 442c movement patterns. The data appeared on his pad, and Jake saw immediately what the other crew members had missed. The creatures on Kepler 442c were not just moving randomly or even hunting for food. They were patrolling their territory in shifts like Earth wolves, but on a planetary scale. Jake looked out the window at the stars and wondered what kind of creatures could organize themselves across an entire world. Whatever lived on Kepler 442c was intelligent and social in ways that would probably terrify his crewmates. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Jake could see Kepler 442c through the window. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, with its swirling lights and massive storm systems that seemed to pulse with their own inner life. Beautiful planet, said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see Luna Blake standing nearby. She was human like him, but much more experienced and respected by the crew. Yes, Jake said, but I think it might be more dangerous than anyone realizes. Luna sat down next to him and looked out at the planet. You notice the patterns too. The coordination across such vast distances suggests intelligence far beyond what we usually encounter. Jake nodded. The captain thinks brute force will work, but these creatures have been working together for who knows how long. They probably see us coming from light years away. Well, Luna said with a small smile, maybe being underestimated by our own crew will turn out to be an advantage. Sometimes the smallest person in the room sees things that giants miss. Jake hoped she was right, but as he watched the lights dance across Kepler 442c's surface, he had a feeling that this mission would change everything for him and for humanity's place in the galaxy.